Governor Jindal.
Thank y'all very, very much. It is great to be in sunny South Florida. Thank y'all very much. You know, you've probably heard this over and over, but this is literally the most important election of our entire lifetimes. Let me tell you why this is such an important election. We have got a man in the White House. And let's be honest, look, he is a good family man. President Obama is a good husband, a good father. I've only got two problems with the president that is in the White House today. The first, we have got the most incompetent president since Jimmy Carter was in the White House. My second problem with him is that he is the most liberal president since Jimmy Carter was in the White House. It is so important that we work to elect Governor Romney and make President Obama a one-term president. Now, let me tell you why I say that. Let's start with the incompetence. Let's listen to the president's own words. You remember, he said at the beginning of his term, if we can't turn this economy around in 3 years, it'll be a one-term proposition. We heard President Clinton say in 2010, if we can't turn this economy around, kick us out of office. Well, let's make sure that's one promise they actually keep to the American people. Let's kick them out of office come this fall. Remember what he promised us? Remember he said, give us an $800 billion stimulus package. We'll keep unemployment below 8%. It has been above 8% for 41 months and counting. Now, look at what's going on in this country. 23 million underemployed, unemployed Americans. Look what's going on in this country. Since President Obama's been elected, we've lost nearly 500,000 jobs. Since he's been elected, median household net worth is at a 2-decade low. Median family income's gone down $4,000. $4,000 a year. If you've got children, I've got young children at home. If you've got children, grandchildren, if they graduate from college this year, nearly a 50% chance they're going to be underemployed or unemployed. And he's trying to tell us this is a recovery. Doesn't feel like much of a recovery to me, even here in Florida. Even here in Florida, which is doing better now that you've got a Republican governor, we still have 100,000 fewer Floridians working since President Obama was elected. Even in Florida, median household income's gone down over $3,000 since President Obama has been elected. Does that sound like a recovery to you? And here's the scary thing. In response to this, what are his solutions? All he wants to do is spend more, tax more, borrow more. Remember, he promised us he'd cut that deficit in half by the end of his first term? Instead, he's borrowed over $1 trillion every year he's been in office. Over almost $16 trillion of accumulated debt. Now, what does that mean to us? You know, I could give you a lot of numbers and facts and figures. I'll just share with you just a quick anecdote. The German foreign minister, he said something interesting a couple of weeks ago. Didn't get a lot of attention, but President Obama was telling the Europeans they need to get their economy growing again. He was trying to give them advice because he was worried it was going to hurt his re-election. It was going to hurt us over here. Well, the German finance minister, had something interesting to say. He said, with all due respect, he said, we don't need to be taking lessons from you. He said, until you get your house in order, you don't need to be giving us advice. Now, the debt in the Eurozone countries is 80% of GDP. Over here in America, it's 100% of GDP. But I want you to think about that statement for just a second. The Europeans are telling us we are spending and borrowing too much. That's how bad things have gotten. The Europeans are telling us. That's kind of like, you know, when the town drunk tells you you've got a drinking problem. Maybe it's time to stop drinking. Maybe it's time to stop spending. Maybe it's time to stop borrowing money from China and others and stop spending our children and grandchildren in debt. Look at what he did with Obamacare. He promised he was going to reform the entitlement programs, never did that. We can't afford the programs we've got, so what does he do? Creates a brand new entitlement program. $1.76 trillion. Look at all the promises he broke. He promised us, if you like your doctor, you like your health plan, you can keep it. Now CBO says as many as over 20 million Americans may lose their employer-provided health care. He said he was going to protect Medicare. He cut Medicare by over $500 billion. Even the government's own actuary said that's not sustainable, that's not realistic. Said he wasn't going to raise our taxes over $500 billion. Said that he was going to decrease the cost of health care to $2,500. Premiums went up 9%. The government itself says health care spending will go up more than if this law hadn't been in place in 2014. The list of broken promises go on and on and on, and after all that, over 25 million individuals will still remain uninsured here in America. But here's the most important thing. When you go to the emergency room with your child, when you go take your parents to go see their doctor, when you go see your own doctor, do you really want a government bureaucrat in the emergency room telling that doctor, that nurse how to practice health care? Do you want a government bureaucrat getting between you and your doctor and your nurse? That is why we've got to repeal, replace Obamacare. Now, I could talk to you a lot more about the incompetence. I want to talk to you just a couple of minutes why I think he is the most liberal president we've had since Jimmy Carter. This election is about two very different visions of America. You know, a couple of weeks ago, the president went to Virginia. He got in trouble for something he said. That's right. Maybe you heard what he said. Any of you out there that's got a small business or worked or had a small business, well, the president's got news for you. He said, well, you didn't build that. Well, you know what? His aides came out and said, well, no, that's not what the president really meant. That's not what he said. And how many times have we heard this? Remember, a few weeks before that, he said, well, the private sector is doing just fine. It's the public sector we've got to worry about. And people got mad, and his aides had to come out and say, oh, no, he didn't really mean that. Let me explain what he had to say. And then we find out he hasn't met with his jobs council in months. Advisors had to come out and say, well, he's been busy. He's had other things to do. Golfing and campaigning, that's right. And then last year, 3 different times, in 2011, 3 different times, he gave speeches. We talked about our country. He talked about us being lazy, losing our ambition, losing our edge. I've got news for the president. Mr. President, the American people aren't lazy. We haven't lost our ambition. Now, maybe our president has, but our people have not. We need to replace the president. We don't need to replace the American dream in this country. He says things like that. They come, 4 years ago when he was campaigning, he went to California and said the American people are clinging to their guns and religion. And then his aides had to come out and apologize for that as well. But, I think these comments, I don't think they're mistakes. I think they reveal something about what this president really believes. Because that's right, one on the teleprompter. By the way, I don't see a teleprompter out here. Do y'all? I don't know what happened to those. But the problem is, I think they actually reveal what this president believes. This election, now look, their president's going to try to distort Governor Romney's record. He's going to try to attack everything he's done when he was governor, when he was in the private sector, and he ran the Olympics. They even attacked what he was doing in high school. I'm glad they're not talking about what I did in high school. That's all I can say. I'm glad they're not talking about that today. But let's go back. Let's look at what this election is really, really about. Governor Romney's got a great record. When he was governor of Massachusetts, per capita income grew faster than the national average. Unemployment below the national average, below 5%. They were losing jobs. They were gaining, when he got there, they were gaining jobs when he left. One of the top 10 turnaround states in the country. Balanced a $3 billion budget problem, put $2 billion in their rainy day fund. But this election is not about those distractions. See, the president can't run on his record. Can't run on his broken promises, so he's going to try to distract our attention. This election is about two very different visions of America. On one side, on the president's side, is what I call the Occupy Wall Street perspective. Remember, he went to Ohio a few weeks ago. He gave an economic speech for 55 minutes. And it was hope and change 4 years ago. Now it's divide and blame. Everything is somebody else's fault. He's trying to run against President Bush. He's trying to run against President Nixon. He couldn't beat either one of those guys. He can't beat Governor Romney either. This is not about those distractions. This is about the future. But Governor Romney's got a different vision for America. Unlike the Occupy Wall Street perspective, it's not about dividing us by class, by age, by gender, by geography. Governor Romney understands that in America, we're not entitled to equal outcomes. This is not a country where we believe you're entitled to your neighbor's property. You're not entitled to your neighbor's house or car or his property. Here in America, we believe something different. We don't believe in demonizing success or small business owners. Instead, we believe that here in America, you're entitled to equal opportunity, not equal outcomes. And this is what's so great about this great country. What's so great about this country is that the circumstances of your birth don't determine your outcomes as an adult. You don't have to be born in the right zip code. You don't have to be born in the right race, gender, last name. None of that determines your outcome as an adult. If you're willing to work hard and get a great education, there's no limit to what you can do in this great country. That's the American dream, and the reason this is so important, I'm about to wrap up. I know it's hot. But the reason I think that this is so important is that every one of us has somebody in our family that was the first to break through. For me, it was my dad. Maybe it was you, maybe it was your parents, your grandparents. Every one of us has a story like this. My dad's 1 of 9. First and only one that got past the 5th grade. You've all heard these stories. Every one of you's probably had a father or grandfather that would tell you they didn't have running water, they didn't have electricity, they had to walk uphill to go to school and back from school. You couldn't, both ways, that's exactly right. They went to the same school. You couldn't complain about anything, because anytime you complain, I asked my dad for an allowance, he said, fine, I'll pay you an allowance, but I'm going to charge you rent for living in my house. But you know what's great is my dad was the first to get that education, knowing that his kids and his grandchildren were going to do better. That's what's great about the American dream. And unfortunately, this president, he wants to make us more like Europe. He's already grown federal spending to 24, 25% of the GDP. He is already trying to create a culture of dependence. We've seen food stamp rolls grow 70% in the last 5 years. This is not a sustainable path. We can't have more people in the cart than pulling the cart. That's not what has made this such a great country. Well, look, I know I'm preaching to the choir. You guys have been so great to come out here on a hot Saturday afternoon. As I wrap up, I want to tell you, this election is not about us. This is about our children and grandchildren. Every generation of Americans has left more opportunities for our children than we inherited from our parents. That is the American dream. We must not become the first generation that mortgages our children's and grandchildren's future. This is about leaving them the same opportunities, even greater opportunities that we inherited. So this is an important election, maybe the most important election of our lifetimes. We can't afford another 4 more years of President Obama. And Florida is going to be a very, very important state. You guys elect presidents in Florida, and you've got an opportunity to do so again. So as I close, I want to make 2 final comments. Number 1 is this. It is so important. Between now and Election Day, you've got to tell your friends, your neighbors, your family members, people you work with, everybody you know, how important this election is. Because they're going to do everything they can to distract us, to distort the governor's records, to put out all kinds of nonsense. This is about 2 different visions of the American dream. This is about what kind of future we leave for our children and grandchildren. So the first thing I want to say is thank you for coming out today, but our work's not done till we win this election and elect a Republican majority to repeal and replace Obamacare. Last thing I want to do is say thank you. Thank you for coming out today. God bless you. God bless the great state of Florida. God bless these United States of America.